All right, ladies, so we're going to go over deployment real quick. Something that's really important when you're doing this is to make sure, first and foremost, that you have everything working before you try and put it on Heroku. So everything needs to be working locally. So here I have the burger application up. I can click devour it here, and something moves to the devoured. I could add a burger here, and it's added to the list. So we want to make sure that all of that is working before we move on to trying to put this on Heroku. So now that I know that this is working, we're just going to follow the steps that Sarah sent out on how to create a JAWSDB and then getting it onto Heroku. So let's go through that real quick. So we're going to go to our terminal here. And you can see this is where it was working locally. And I'm just going to kill my nodemon where I was checking to make sure that it was working. And we're just going to start moving into these steps. So first we're going to do a Heroku create. And it's giving me this information. Now, if I look at my git remote -v, I'll see I have a Heroku link there. You will also have links to your GitHub repository. I don't have that set up since I'm just doing this to show how to deploy it. All right, so now we're going to go to Heroku. And we're going to find this still dawn on my dashboard. Still dawn. We're going to configure add-ons, and we're going to search for JAWSDB MySQL. We're going to click on that provision button, and it's going to give us this. And then when we click here, it'll come up and it's going to give us a whole bunch of connection information. So this is what I like to do for mine. I like to actually turn off MAMP so that I know things are working correctly. And then I'm going to come over to SQL Pro. And I'm going to do a new connection window, I believe. Yep. So it brings this all back up. And I'm just going to take the information from over here and put it into this. So our host is going to be this here. And really make sure that you don't have any extra spaces on the beginning or the end. Our username. Password, and our port is 3306, and I'm going to connect. And you can see it's connected even though I don't have MAMP running. So I now know that in our next step, which is checking, putting in the process.env information into our code, that it's not accidentally falling back onto our localhost information. This was a problem that another student had. I don't think it's a common problem. Sometimes Heroku does have glitches, and I think that's all it was. But I've done this I've turned off MAMP just to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I'm going to now go to our connections.js, and I'm going to change this here. So instead of having this var connections, we're going to make an if statement here. So we're going to do an if statement. We're going to say if process.env JAWSDB _URL we're going to say that connection is equal to MySQL dot create connection, and use the process.env JAWSDB URL information. Then we're going to put in our else here. We're going to take all of this and stick it right in there. So now we've got our if and our else. And then we don't need this. Instead, we just need var connections to be or connection.connect to be just a function, and we're still going to module.exports connection. So now we're going to now we're going to do a git commit over in our terminal. And we're just going to do an add and a commit that we changed connection.js. And since this is my first push, it's adding all of these things. You will probably have fewer things that it's adding. And I'm going to do a git push Heroku master. And while that's all pushing, we're going to go back to SQL Pro, Heidi SQL or SQL Workbench, and we're going to put in the information from our database folder, our seeds and our schema, into that. So if we come over here and we choose our database, this database here should match up with what you got from your JAWSDB page. And in here, we're going to run our schema. We're just going to paste that in there. And we're going to run that selection. All right, access denied. Run all. For user to database, okay. Well, why is my access denied? All right, we're going to try this again. So we have a connection. So if we run this selection, why is it run all? Okay, so we have a burgers table here. And if I select star from burgers and I run this selection, you see that I did create the table. I don't know why it was telling me that it wasn't allowing me, because it did make that table. So that's unexpected. Oh, because I was trying to, is that what was happening here? Establish a connection once you're connected. Okay, yes, so I should have just made the table, not tried to make the database, because we're using this jumbled letter of database. I just got ahead of myself and tried to add more than I needed to. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put in these seeds so that we have something to look at. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to run this selection. And then I'm going to run this line again. And you see that we have our burgers and our devoured status as well as the IDs in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to this and we're going to look at the structure, and we want to add a created at, and it's not going to be an integer, it's going to be a timestamp, and we don't want it to be allow null. Great, okay, so now that's all in there. If we come back to our query and we select all from burgers, we should see now we also have a created app. Now we're going to come back to our terminal and we're going to run Heroku open. And here you see we've got still dawn. We can devour a burger. We can add a burger. And things are working great. And that's all there is to deploying to Heroku. Just remember not to make the mistake that I did when you're creating your table in your database. You do not need to copy your create database and use database. You just need to follow this create table. And then you can insert information in there if you like. If you have any questions, don't feel any hesitation to reach out to me, and I'm excited to see your work.